people who've been caught in those "I swear it isn't what it looks like" scenarios, what were you doing and what did it look? Handed my passport to the Canadian border officer when driving to Canada. "Sir, why are you giving me money with your passport?" Apparently I had kept about €100 folded in my passport for my next trip to Europe. A somewhat related story: a friend of mine used to keep a spare $100 in between the back of his license and the laminate layer. Back when licenses were printed on paper then laminated, he got pulled over for a really bad speeding offense that probably would have been reckless, and nervously handed over the license without thinking about it, and got off with a warning. A bit later he checked on it and the $100 was gone, so he unwittingly but successfully bribed his way out of a ticket. As a teen girl, I had a male friend who was gay but not out. His father was the traditional Southern type, so naturally both his sons were put in Boy Scouts, etc. We were hanging out one day and he told me he had to leave to go to a nearby church for his scout meeting or whatever. He asked me to come with him since they were going to have a slow day, and friends were welcome. We go and sit in the dark empty chapel while his group plays board games and stuff in another room. Everyone was just sort of doing their own thing. I had been in a car wreck recently and had been having frequent muscle tension in my left shoulder, among other issues. Frequently, my friend would offer to help me out. I'd take off my hoodie or whatever and he'd dig his knuckles into the areas under my shoulder blade while we talked. So we're sitting in the dark empty chapel talking about boys he liked, and he, like he often did at the time, offered to rub my shoulder while we talked. We hung out for a while, just laughing and bullshitting, and then head out of the chapel when it was time to go home. Velp, neither of us considered how it would look for a young boy and a young lady to be walking out of a dark chapel laughing while she pulls back on her long-sleeved flannel shirt back over a tank top, while his father and pastor look on in horror and misunderstanding. Damien, if you find my Reddit account, I want you to know if I had to go back, I'd let your dad think I'm a hoe all over again to keep your secret. The place I work has bathrooms with 3 stalls side by side, except the bathroom by the elevator. It's a single stall with 2 urinals beside it. It's rare that the stall is open, but one day I got lucky and managed to do my business privately. As I stood up to exit the stall, I spun the lock and there was a loud pop. The lock had broken and I couldn't get out. I waited 5 minutes for someone to come in so I could send them for help, but nobody came. Eventually I decided I was going to have to either go over the partition, or under. I wasn't about to touch the bathroom floor, so I opted for climbing over. Right as I swung my leg over the wall to the outside, the director of my site walked in to see me on top of the wall with a look like a deer in headlights. Most awkward moment of my life. A long time ago, I was a photographer at a small town newspaper. I was photographing a girls' volleyball game, and after the game, I asked the athletic director at this small high school for a current roster so I could match names with numbers on uniforms. She said sure, follow me to my office. This was a high school built in the 50s or 60s, so the coaches' offices were connected to both the boys' and girls' locker rooms, with no third option to get to the offices. You went down the hallway to either the boys' or the girls' locker room, and way before you turned the corner to go into the actual locker room, you turned right and went into the office cluster that was between the 2 locker rooms. But to the casual observer, you were walking into one of the 2 locker rooms. So I get the roster, thank her, and head back out to the main hallway, where there were about 20 to 30 parents of the opposing team waiting outside the girls' locker room to meet their daughters. I'm a 20-something dude with a huge camera dangling around his neck walking out of what appears to be the girls' locker room where their daughters were changing out of their uniforms. I didn't bother to explain, just walked quickly to my car so I wouldn't get lynched. In school, we had this cool PE and biology teacher, who tried new things while teaching. One of these things was bringing a video cam to a PE session to film us, so we could watch our form from an outside perspective and analyze with the class. We were doing handball, I think. I was either sick or forgot my clothes, so I was sitting out on that class. Teach gave me the cam to record while he instructed my fellow students on throwing techniques. I was fumbling my way around the camera, fiddling with the zoom buttons and trying to get a hang of things. When I felt like I knew what I was doing, I started recording my fellow students. Later, we got together in a classroom and Teach showed the video I took without screening it beforehand. Big mistake. The first few moments showed me playing with the zoom. Unfortunately, I had been focused on the camera and not on what I was recording, so I had unintentionally zoomed in on my teacher's butt. I had filmed a 10 seconds close-up on my teacher's, admittedly formidable, behind, and it looked totally intentional on my part. My whole class laughed at me and my teacher gave me a funny look. Meanwhile I was blubbering about how it totally wasn't what it looked like, that I was playing with the zoom button and more irrelevant things that nobody cared about. One time while in high school, I was staying at a friend's house. We'll call him John. John and I snuck out of his parents' house around 1 a.m. to go to a party. Before arriving, other friends that were already at the party let us know the cops busted the party and it's over. It's around 1:30 a.m. now and we make our way back to his parents' place. Unknown to us, his brother came home while we were gone and locked the door behind him. John and I did not have a key. We were bored and locked out now with nothing to do, so we parked his minivan on a random street in his neighborhood and smoked some weed. John has pillows and blankets in the back of his minivan as he parties and smokes often, usually in his car. He went to lay down on the pillows and blankets and took his jacket and beanie off. I took my shoes and my belt off as I wanted to get comfortable. I assumed we would end up sleeping in there. After a bowl or two, weed was and still is very much illegal in my state. We see flashing red and blue lights. 2 police cars pull up behind us. I'm shitting my pants because we still have maybe a half G left of bud, so not much. But I had seen buddies go to jail for less than a G before, so as you can imagine I'm pretty scared. Also never been in any kind of trouble before. One cop comes to the driver side, the other the passenger side. They start shining flashlights in the car. They tell us to exit the vehicle immediately, so we do. Then they search us and find the small amount of weed. One officer begins searching the vehicle. The other officer then proceeds to look me in the eyes and with complete seriousness says, "All right boys, I see what's going on here. Look, there's nothing to be ashamed of, but you can't be doing this in your car on the side of the street in the neighborhood. I'm going to let you all off tonight. In the future make sure you guys are safe, always use protection." I was baffled and speechless. Absolutely nothing against homosexuals, but I am straight and have never been accused of being homosexual. I looked at the officer and said, "I'm sorry." He said, "Look son, you'll get no judgment from me, but you have your shoes and belt off, there's blankets and pillows in the back, and your friend has sex hair, he took his beanie off and his hair was crazy, and you're parked at 2 a.m. on the side of the street. Go home and don't let us find you again." Him and his partner then re-entered their police vehicles and left. TLDR, Buddy and I parked on the side of the street in a neighborhood to smoke weed in his car, still very much illegal in my state. Cops came. Cops let us go without penalty because they thought Buddy and I were having gay sex. We're both straight, and just needed somewhere to do it. It's not what IT looks like. Oh boy, your username is kinda fitting for my story. Backtrack a few years. We were at my friend's basement playing liar's dice and smoking, and I said I had to go to pee. I stood up and climbed the stairs to the bathroom, unzipped my pants and so on. Suddenly I felt very dizzy and I had to grab the sink so I don't just fall and hit my head. Hanging there for a good 15 seconds I tried to get up, go to kitchen and relax on the couch, but on the halfway through I just fell to the floor. I'm not sure how long did I lie there, but I guess for something like 3 to 5 minutes. My friends came upstairs, saw me lying there, my pants still in my ankles and piss on my t-shirt. I started laughing and said, "You guys know those moments when people say this is not how it looks? Well, this is my moment." I told them what happened and they laughed their ass off while apologizing over and over again for the laughter and helped me to go to sleep. Years ago, it was premiere weekend of the movie Signs. My brother, his wife, my sister, and her husband took me to go see the movie. My favorite movie candy has and always will be Milk Duds, so of course I obtain a box to enjoy throughout the show. I had been eating on them randomly throughout the movie, as I always do. Of course the movie is long, so I finished them before the end. Anyways, as the movie concludes, I attempt to stand, except, I can't. I look at my brother, and I am like I can't stand up. I pulled and tugged a few times, and it was like I was hooked on something. Finally, I pull one last time, and I hear a loud strip. I stand up, turn around, and apparently at some point during the movie, I thought it would be nice to feed my testicles a few Milk Duds. Several Milk Duds had fallen in the crotch of my khaki shorts, and had melted from me sitting on them throughout the movie. The chocolate and caramel together developed into a glue-like substance, which I firmly believe could be a cost-effective substitute for epoxy, and basically attached my ass to the surface of the seat. I told everyone to walk behind me as we leave the theater so nobody sees my Milk Dud, shit-like mass on the crack of my ass, and we make our way to the lobby. We are in a crowded area, so I meander through and make it to the door. I open it, and while I am holding it for the rest of the people I came to the movies with, I look back and there they were, all four of them standing in the middle of the lobby pointing and laughing at me while I stand there with a pile of fused Milk Duds on my ass. I ran to the car. TL, doctor, sat on Milk Duds during a movie, melted to my crotch, and looked like I shartled in my pants. Can confirm, I did not. Twice in one night. My roommate and a girl he reconnected with went to the club that night. I'm meeting her for the first time. I drove us 30 minutes into town and met up with a bunch of friends and we're having a really fun night. She ends up eventually getting too drunk and goes outside with my roommate to get some air. The bouncers see what state she's in and don't let her back in. I get a call from my roommate that we need to leave. As we're leaving the club walking to the car, she all of a sudden just goes into a full sprint. We have no idea why but we go chasing after her. She gets over to a car that looks like hers, it isn't, and tries to open the door. She's totally convinced and now we're trying to pull her over to my car to go home, but she's got her mind made up that she wants to go to her car. We get her over to my car but she's still pushing us back and not wanting to get in my car. We eventually had to help her into the backseat of my two-door car while she was being difficult. Thoughts are now running in my head of what other people would interpret what they were seeing. Fortunately she stops being combative once we get her in the car and the door is closed. She eventually goes night-night during the ride home. We get to our house and she's still lights out. Me and my friend have to spatula her out of the back of my car. I'm now carrying her by the legs and he's got her by the upper body. We get about 2 steps from the car headed towards the house and all of a sudden a completely unknown voice to me says, "What are you guys doing?" Out of seemingly nowhere, a flashlight is in my eyes and a police officer in all black in there in my driveway, seeing me and a friend carrying this passed out gal. I immediately drop her legs. The thoughts going through my mind are that I personally don't know her and this looks sketchy AF. Luckily my friend really wasn't fazed by it. He told her she just got really drunk and asked if he could take her inside first. The cop said, "As long as you don't come back out and shoot me, we're cool." After more talking and the officer radioing in our IDs, he ended it with, "Yeah, I think I'm going to trust you guys on this one. Have a good night." My roommate is married to her now and I was his best man. I guess it was worth it in the end. This was about 30 years ago. My then boyfriend, now husband, and I had a full day date planned. We spent most of the day at an amusement park and had a great time. We also planned a nice dinner out afterwards. When we left the amusement park, we couldn't find anywhere to change so we went to a gas station. There was only one bathroom so we had to share. He is a gentleman so he turned away from me. We'd never undressed in front of each other, but again, it's also a gas station bathroom and pretty well used, so we were trying to keep our clothes from touching anything. He bent over to tie his shoes, so I put my dress across his back for a second while I pulled my shirt off. Right then, the door flies open and there's a line of people waiting to use the restroom. Their view is of two people half undressed and one bending over. I screamed and they slammed the door shut. Obviously, it looks like we're having sex. I wanted to die. We got dressed in record time but then had to walk out to all these disapproving and disgusted stares. We laughed later, but at that moment it was like getting caught by your parents multiplied by 3. This was years ago but still brings embarrassment. I was at my older sister's high school graduation ceremony with my family. It was outdoors on the football field and family was seated in the bleachers. I was 10 years old and super bored. We were pretty high up in the bleachers and everyone had digital point and shoot cameras at the time. My mom was putting hers back in her case and down by her feet. She accidentally kicked it with her foot and fell behind the bleachers. Knowing I was bored, she told me to go get it. The back of the bleachers are where all the concession stands are. I run down to go get the camera case. When I pick it up, this old woman starts yelling at me saying what am I doing down there and that I was stealing that camera. She runs over and grabs me by the arm so I can't run back to my family up in the bleachers. She drags me over to the cop that was there and calls me a little thief. She continues to tell him that she watched me climb the back of the bleachers, I'm deathly afraid of heights, and snatch this camera to steal. The cop starts questioning me, but I am frozen with fear. I was a quiet, shy kid. Like my parents took me to speech therapy because I refused to speak, but the doctor just found out I could speak, I just didn't want to. Tears start flowing and this lady will not shut up. So what does the cop do? He drags me to the front of the bleachers, in the middle of the graduation ceremony to point out my family. The lady who caught me is attached to his hip salivating with her weird sense of justice. The cop walked me up to my mom and my mom immediately yells at him to let go of me. As you can imagine, this creates quite a scene. The graduation ceremony comes to a halt and now 1,000 plus are looking at me. The cop finally realizes his mistake in thinking my mom would be civil and sees the disturbance he caused, so he has her come back behind the bleachers where the lady found me. After a long discussion and my mom proving the camera was hers, the cop says all is well and leaves us be. But the woman that caught me scolded my mom and they yell some fun stuff at each other and then we resumed the day. I hate that lady. I am now super aware of all my actions and how they look to others at all times. She was the mom of one of my brother's classmates and of course my brother was a bully. I am not sure if she knew I was his little brother at the time or not. 6 years later she ended up running a red light and T-boning me when I was a brand new driver at 16. She recognized me immediately and called me thief the whole time we dealt with the police. That was fun explaining to the cop. My mom told me this story at Christmas. Last weekend, your dad and I got together with some friends for a cookout. There were maybe 5 couples there and they all brought their kids who were running around shooting each other with Nerf guns. One of them, a little redhead boy, kept getting in trouble for shooting people in the face, and was generally being a brat. The kid ran inside while I was getting a drink from the kitchen and pointed his gun at me. I told him sternly, "Do not shoot me." And he did. So I turned him around, grabbed the back of his underwear and lifted him off the ground by the crack of his ass, a wedgie. Right as I did, Chris, the host of the party, and probably my parents' closest friend at the party, walked into the room and shouted my name. I turned around with this kid in a flying wedgie, a complete deer in the headlights. And apparently Chris just wanted to get my attention because the adults were all sitting down to play some big board game or something. So that's how my mom gave a kid she never met an atomic wedgie at a multi-family Christmas party. I was getting ready to drive back to college after being home for winter break and I loaded up several episodes of Stargate SG-1 on my laptop so I would have something to listen to on the long drive. I got back, parked my car, closed the laptop, and headed up to my dorm room. My roommate was already there and we were glad to talk about each other's break. I pulled out my laptop and opened it up. The audio to the episode started playing immediately, but the password screen was all that displayed. I had closed the laptop right in the middle of a scene where the Ori were torturing Claudia Black's character. Apparently that sounds just like kinky hardcore porn. My roommate gave me a look I will never forget, and I looked back with slowly dawning horror becoming evident on my face. He said I'd better leave and was halfway to the door before I ceased my chants and shouted, "Stop right there." /unexpected meatloaf. I made him stay as I entered my password to prove it wasn't what it looked like. After that we laughed for a solid 5 minutes and had a great story to tell other people. It looked like I was running from the police. What really happened was I was a girl walking alone at night in the dark in the middle of a quiet village in England when I heard footsteps running. So instead of waiting to verify it was a rapist, I ran. Knowing the village like the back of my hand, I took some unusual twists and turns. I heard the rapist get stuck on an obstacle that I knew was there but knew they wouldn't. But as I ran ahead, someone with a torch, flashlight, was on the other side and they shouted, "I've got her. I've got her." Fuck, 2 rapist murderers. I must have looked panicked because it was at this point he decided to say they were police. They asked me why I was running from police and I asked why the hell they were chasing me. It turns out they chased me because I ran and I ran because they chased me. It was the most ridiculous thing ever. Why didn't they shout "Stop police" as soon as I ran, and why were they running around the village at that time anyway? Really odd event. Around 1992, friends of mine decided to have an impromptu party at a random neighborhood pool at around 1 a.m. We brought some beer and decided to hang out. At one point they decided to jump in the hot tub. I didn't want to because I was in jeans, so I sat in a chair. Cops show up a little while later and one grabs me and brings me to his car, starts radioing to another cop I got him. I kept asking who he thought I was and he was just grilling me. Asking me how long I had been there, what I was doing there. I refused to answer any questions until he explained why he wasn't questioning anybody else. After a short while of him questioning and me refusing to answer and him threatening to arrest me, another cruiser pulls up with some long-haired dude in the back seat. Turns out someone who looked like me was trying to break into apartments and I fit the description. And seeing as I was the only one of the group fully clothed and not in the hot tub, he assumed I was the one he was looking for. They let me go and told everybody to leave. But it wasn't a fun experience, especially after I realized just how far that could have gone if they didn't catch the real guy.
So many memories, do you remember these moments way back in the time? Trapped at the back of my mind, I am so happy to grind, I am so happy to find so much experience now that I'm passing the lines, now that I'm grasping the signs. I have been laughing a lot, got nothing to hide, no I got nothing to hide, bitch I am stuck left behind, I need to drive, yeah I need something to ride, build my own bank account, shit that I'm making, now putting it off to the side, feeling the vibe, got this new sorrowful happiness that I just can't seem to guide.